Nathan Freeman had exactly 17 minutes before his entire life collapsed, and he didn't even know it. 17 minutes, the exact window between when the doorman took his smoke break and when the overnight valet returned to the lobby. Linda had timed it perfectly. She'd timed everything perfectly. And now, as Nathan stumbled through the door of their penthouse at 4:47 a.m., reeking of his mistress's perfume, he was about to discover that his wife hadn't just left him. She'd systematically dismantled everything he'd spent 5 years building. The crib, gone. The baby, gone. His reputation, about to be gone. All that remained was a black USB drive and a note that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Before we start, take a moment to subscribe and like this video. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. Your support helps us bring even more captivating stories your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you. Now, let's get into the story. Nathan Freeman pushed through the steel-reinforced door of their Tribeca penthouse at 4:47 a.m., the magnetic lock clicking shut behind him like a trap closing. His Bryony suit was rumpled, the collar stained with foundation 2 shades lighter than Linda's skin, and Jessica's signature vanilla orchid perfume, the $400 bottle he'd expensed as a client gift, clung to him like evidence. He checked his Payback Philippe. Almost 5. Another emergency investor call. Another plausible excuse. But the air felt wrong. The apartment was silent. Not the peaceful quiet of sleep, but the hollow silence of abandonment. Usually, by now, Linda would be in the nursery's Eames rocking chair, their son drowsing against her chest while she hummed that old gospel hymn her grandmother taught her, "His eye is on the sparrow." Nathan always complained it was too melancholy for a baby, but privately, guiltily, it was the only sound that ever made the cold marble floors feel like a home instead of a showroom. Tonight, nothing. No humming. No soft breathing. No tiny cries filtering through the baby monitor. Nathan's jaw tightened. He moved toward the nursery, leather shoes clicking against imported Italian tile, already mentally rehearsing his script. "You know how volatile these deals are, Linda. You're being irrational. Postpartum is making you paranoid." He froze in the doorway. The $4,000 mahogany crib, gone. The hand-painted growth chart Linda commissioned from that Etsy artist, vanished. Even the faint, powdery sweetness of the hypoallergenic baby lotion she ordered in bulk had been scrubbed from the air, replaced by the sterile chemical scent of industrial cleaning solution. "Linda." His voice cracked. "Linda." No answer. He spun toward their bedroom. The walk-in closet door hung open. Her side, empty. Wire hangers swaying slightly, like ghosts. The silver picture frame from her nightstand, the one holding their wedding photo, the one where his smile looked genuine, missing. Panic clawed up his throat. He stumbled into the kitchen, and that's when he saw it. On the pristine Carrara marble island, positioned with surgical precision, his key fob. A single matte black USB drive. And a folded sheet of paper, his own company letterhead, the $80 per ream stock he insisted on for brand consistency. His hands shook as he unfolded it. Nathan. By the time you realize this, we are far away. I know your entire plan. Every document. Every lie. Do not look for us. My lawyer will be in touch. Linda." The words blurred. His knees buckled against the island edge. Gone. Where could she go? She had no income. He'd convinced her to take time off from her architecture firm. No family nearby. Her mother was in hospice in Atlanta. No accounts in her own name. He'd simplified their finances during her 3rd trimester. He grabbed the counter, knuckles white. She had nothing. She was nothing without him. That was the point. That was the entire. His gaze drifted left. The hidden Nest camera he'd installed 6 months ago, the one disguised as a smoke detector, the one she wasn't supposed to know about, was aimed directly at the kitchen island. Its lead pulsed slow and steady. Red. 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 Recording. A cold sweat erupted across his neck. Nathan lunged for the USB, fumbling it into his laptop. His password, her birthday, the one condescending gesture he thought was romantic, unlocked a single folder. Freeman exit strategy evidence. Inside, 347 files. Emails. Bank statements. Audio recordings. His draft custody motions. The psychiatric evaluation he'd commissioned to declare her unfit. Communications with Jessica timestamped during Linda's labor. And a video file labeled, for the judge.mp4. His stomach dropped into freefall. This wasn't the panicked flight of a broken woman. This was the calculated demolition executed by an architect who'd just removed every load-bearing wall and walked out before the collapse. He'd been playing power games. Linda had been playing chess. Nathan's whisper barely escaped, "What did you do?" But he already knew. She destroyed him with the same meticulous precision she once used to design award-winning buildings. Foundation first, then everything else would follow. 18 months before Linda Raymond vanished with her newborn son, she'd walked into the glass and steel tower of Freeman Ventures wearing a tailored navy dress and carrying a portfolio of her urban revitalization designs. She was there to pitch Nathan Freeman's firm on a mixed-use project in Bed-Stuy, affordable housing integrated with commercial space, the kind of work that made her architecture degree from Howard mean something. Nathan had walked into that conference room like he owned gravity itself. Hermes tie. $1,000 smile. He'd listened to her entire pitch without interrupting, then said, "You don't just design buildings. You design second chances." 3 months later, they were engaged. 6 months after that, she was signing a prenuptial agreement his lawyer assured her was standard for high-net-worth marriages, never noticing that every asset acquired during marriage would be titled in Nathan's name alone, for tax optimization. She believed him. Everyone did. The Tribeca penthouse felt like a dream she hadn't earned. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Hudson River. Sub-Zero appliances still wrapped in protective film. Nathan had walked her through each room like a proud developer, saying, "This is our foundation, Linda. Everything we build starts here." But she hadn't noticed, because she wasn't looking, that the deed, the mortgage, the co-op board application, every single document carried only his name. 22 months before Linda Raymond disappeared with her son, she met Nathan Freeman at the Whitney Museum's annual fundraiser gala. She'd been invited because her firm had just won a design award for a community center in Brooklyn that transformed an abandoned warehouse into something hopeful. Nathan had been there because men like him were always there, writing tax-deductible checks and collecting connections like trading cards. He'd approached her near the Hopper exhibition, champagne flute in hand, and said something that should have been a warning but sounded like poetry: "I invest in potential that other people overlook." Within 3 weeks, they were inseparable. Within 3 months, engaged. Nathan was intoxicating in those early days, flowers delivered to her drafting table, handwritten notes tucked into her portfolio, the way he'd study her building models like they were sculptures at the Met. He told her she was brilliant. He told her she was going to change skylines. She believed every word. The wedding was small, elegant, exactly what Linda wanted. The prenuptial agreement was 53 pages of legal language Nathan's attorney assured her was completely standard for high-net-worth marriages. She'd signed it at midnight the day before the wedding, too exhausted to read the clause that titled all marital assets solely in Nathan's name. The Tribeca penthouse was a dream rendered in marble and glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Hudson. A kitchen that belonged in Architectural Digest. Nathan had carried her over the threshold, spinning her around the empty living room, promising this was just the beginning of everything they'd build together. The first crack appeared 3 months later. Nathan was hosting a dinner for potential investors in a biotech startup. Linda had spent the afternoon cooking, her grandmother's recipe for braised short ribs, the one that took 6 hours and filled the apartment with warmth. She'd mentioned, casually, that she was finalizing designs for a mixed-use development in Harlem, something she was genuinely proud of. Nathan had laughed. Not cruelly, not obviously. Just a light, dismissive chuckle as he refilled an investor's wine glass. "Linda's passionate about her little projects," he'd said, the word little landing like a slap. "Community centers, affordable housing. Very admirable hobby work." Hobby. The investors had nodded politely, already moving on to cap tables and exit strategies. Linda had stood there, serving spoon frozen midair, feeling something inside her calcify. Nathan squeezed her waist later that night, kissed her forehead, told her dinner was perfect. He never apologized for the comment. She never forgot it. Linda saw the positive pregnancy test at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, the second line appearing like a promise. She'd imagined this moment differently, Nathan there beside her, his hand on her stomach, that rare genuine smile breaking through his carefully constructed veneer. Instead, she texted him a photo. He responded 4 hours later, "Great news. Let's discuss tonight." He came home at 11 p.m., kissed her forehead, said he was thrilled, then disappeared into his home office for a conference call with Singapore. She told herself it would get better. That once the baby came, Nathan would remember why they'd started this. That fatherhood would soften the edges money had sharpened. She was wrong. Nathan became a ghost who paid the bills. He cited deal flow like it was scripture, a justification for every missed doctor's appointment, every dinner eaten alone, every night she fell asleep to the blue glow of his laptop in the other room. By her second trimester, Linda realized she could go 36 hours without a meaningful conversation with her own husband. The unraveling accelerated when she visited his office during her 7th month. She'd brought lunch, Thai food from the place near their apartment, the one Nathan claimed to love but never had time for anymore. His assistant waved her through with barely a glance. That's when she met Jessica. Mid-20s, effortlessly beautiful in that specific way that required a personal trainer and a standing hair appointment. She was perched on the edge of Nathan's desk, laughing at something on his laptop screen, her hand resting casually on his shoulder. The familiarity was wrong, not sexual exactly, but intimate in a way that made Linda's throat tighten. Nathan had introduced them with corporate efficiency. "Linda, this is Jessica Whitmore, my new associate. Jessica's been instrumental in the Meridian acquisition." Jessica had smiled, warm and deferential, called Linda's pregnancy absolutely glowing, and excused herself with a kind of grace that felt rehearsed. But Linda had seen it. The way Nathan's posture changed when Jessica entered a room. The inside joke embedded in that laptop laugh. The expensive pen, Mont Blanc, the same brand he'd given Linda for their first anniversary, clipped to Jessica's portfolio. After that, Nathan's travel schedule became punishing. Boston, San Francisco, London. He stopped answering her calls, letting them roll to voicemail, texting back hours later with variations of "in meetings." "Can't talk. Everything okay?" When she asked about his day, he'd deploy client confidentiality like a shield, making her feel invasive for wanting connection. Linda stopped asking. She started noticing instead. Linda's water broke at 2:34 a.m. on a Thursday, 3 weeks before her due date. Nathan was in Chicago, supposedly closing a deal he described as career-defining. He'd promised to be on the first flight home if anything happened. She called him 6 times. Every call went to voicemail. She took an Uber to Mount Sinai alone, her overnight bag packed weeks earlier because some part of her had known this was how it would happen. Nathan arrived 19 hours later, still wearing his suit from the emergency M&A meeting that couldn't wait. He held their son for 90 seconds, posed for a single photo Linda would later realize was for his Instagram, and left to handle some urgent emails. When the nurse asked if he'd be staying overnight, Linda said no before he could answer. She already knew. The postpartum depression hit like a building collapse. Some days Linda couldn't get out of bed. Other days she'd stand in the nursery holding her son, terrified by the intrusive thoughts her obstetrician said were normal but felt like proof she was broken. Nathan observed her struggling the way someone might watch a stock price fall, with detached concern and poorly concealed irritation. His comments came wrapped in concern but landed like scalpels. "Are you sure you're bonding with him? Other mothers seem to handle this better. Maybe you should consider that you're not cut out for this." Each one chipped away at something foundational, until Linda started believing that maybe Nathan was right, maybe she was failing at the one thing women were supposed to do instinctively. The truth revealed itself on a Tuesday afternoon during the baby's nap. Linda had been using Nathan's tablet to search for postpartum support groups when a notification banner dropped from the top of the screen. An email draft auto-saved to his cloud, Freeman Custody Strategy, updated timeline. Her hands went cold. She opened it. The email was addressed to Martin Kessler, Nathan's personal attorney. The subject line read like a battle plan. Phrases jumped out like strikes: document erratic behavior, established pattern of instability, psychiatric evaluation to support incompetence claim, leverage postpartum condition, secure sole custody before she stabilizes. There was an attachment, a spreadsheet titled Asset Protection and Custody Timeline Q3-Q4. Linda read it 3 times, each pass making her stomach drop further. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't a failing marriage. This was a systematic campaign. Nathan had been building a case against her since before their son was born, using her isolation, her depression, her vulnerability as ammunition. She looked at her sleeping baby, then back at the screen. And something inside Linda Raymond, something that had been bending under Nathan's calculated cruelty, stopped bending and started calculating back. Linda waited until 3 a.m., when Nathan's breathing settled into the deep rhythm of sleep. She lifted his phone from the nightstand with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. His passcode was still her birthday, the one piece of sentimentality he'd kept, probably because changing it would require admitting he'd moved on. She enabled biometric access using his thumbprint while he slept, a trick she'd learned from a Reddit thread about digital infidelity. Then she went to work. She'd been logging his credentials for months, almost unconsciously at first. The way he'd bark his passwords during conference calls. The pattern of his security questions. The backup email he thought was private. Linda had an architect's mind. She saw systems, structures, the hidden frameworks that held everything together. Now she was using that mind to find the cracks in Nathan's carefully constructed empire. His private cloud opened like a vault she'd always had the combination to. The legal strategy folder was dated 3 months before their son was born. Inside, draft custody motions, financial affidavits designed to hide marital assets, and a document from Dr. Richard Pesicola, a psychiatrist Nathan had paid $15,000 to evaluate Linda without ever meeting her. The report was devastating in its clinical cruelty. Subject demonstrates markers consistent with severe postpartum psychosis, borderline personality disorder, and potential harm to minor child. Recommend immediate psychiatric hold and temporary custody removal pending comprehensive evaluation. Every word was a fabrication. Every diagnosis a weapon. Linda's hands shook as she scrolled through emails between Nathan and Jessica, time-stamped during her labor. Messages that called her unstable and a liability. A thread discussing how to accelerate her deterioration by increasing her isolation. Another planning their future, Nathan and Jessica's future, with her son, in her home, using her absence like it was already a foregone conclusion. She found offshore account statements. Shell corporations. Marital assets systematically transferred into structures designed to hide them from divorce proceedings. Nathan had been planning this since her second trimester, building an exit strategy while she'd been building a nursery. Linda closed the laptop and walked to the nursery. Her son slept with his tiny fists curled near his face, completely unaware that his father had turned his existence into a legal maneuver. She leaned close, her whisper barely audible over the white noise machine. "He won't take you. I will dismantle his world piece by piece." It wasn't a prayer. It was a declaration of war. Linda found Aisha Khan's number in an old Howard University alumni newsletter. They'd been roommates junior and senior year, staying up until 3 a.m. arguing about everything from architecture theory to whether love was worth the vulnerability it required. Aisha had always said no. Linda had always disagreed. Now, sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the penthouse with her son sleeping in his stroller, Linda wondered if Aisha had been right all along. The call lasted 4 minutes. Linda said 7 words that mattered. "I need help. My husband is dangerous." Aisha said 3 back. "I'm on my way." They met the next afternoon in Aisha's Williamsburg office, a converted loft filled with servers and monitors that made it look like a movie hacker's lair. Aisha had changed. Shorter hair, sharper edges, the kind of confidence that came from building something that mattered. Her firm, Sentinel Digital, specialized in helping domestic abuse survivors document evidence before their abusers could destroy it. "Show me everything," Aisha said. Linda showed her. The custody strategy. The fabricated psychiatric evaluation. The emails with Jessica. Aisha's expression never changed, but her fingers moved faster across her keyboard with each new revelation. "He's smart," Aisha said finally. "But he's also arrogant. He thinks you don't know how technology works. That's going to destroy him. Over the next 2 weeks, Aisha taught Linda how to wage digital war. She set up encrypted cloud storage mirroring Nathan's entire digital life, every document, every email, every calendar entry syncing in real time to servers Nathan didn't know existed. She installed keylogger software that captured his passwords as he typed them. She taught Linda how to use metadata, how to authenticate evidence, how to build a chain of custody that would hold up in court. "You're not gathering evidence," Aisha explained. "You're building a prosecution." The financial trail was the most damning discovery. Nathan had created a network of shell corporations across 3 countries: Delaware LLCs, Cayman holding companies, a Panamanian trust. Over 18 months, he'd systematically transferred $4.7 million in marital assets into structures designed to be invisible in divorce proceedings. Money from their joint investments, appreciation on properties Linda's income had helped purchase, even the settlement from her father's estate that Nathan had promised to manage for her. He'd been stealing from her while she was pregnant with his child. Linda watched the numbers populate Aisha's screen, each transaction a tiny act of betrayal that added up to something monstrous. "He really thought you'd never find this," Aisha said quietly. "He thought I was broken," Linda replied. "Good," Aisha said. "Let him keep thinking that." Attorney James Miller's office was nothing like the glass towers where Nathan conducted business. It occupied the 3rd floor of a brownstone in Fort Greene, filled with overstuffed file boxes and furniture that had seen better decades. Miller himself was in his late 50s, with grey dreadlocks pulled back and reading glasses perpetually perched on his head. Aisha had called him the best family lawyer you've never heard of, because the men he destroys sign NDAs to keep the cases quiet. Linda brought everything: printed emails, financial records, the fraudulent psychiatric evaluation, audio recordings of Nathan's dismissive comments about her mothering, captured on her phone during their increasingly rare conversations. Miller spent 40 minutes reviewing the evidence in complete silence, occasionally making notes in handwriting so cramped it looked like code. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Freeman, I've practiced family law for 23 years. I've seen hidden assets, parental alienation, strategic cruelty. But this," he tapped the psychiatric evaluation, "this is a conspiracy to commit fraud and kidnapping dressed up as a custody strategy. Your husband isn't planning a divorce. He's planning an erasure." Linda's hands tightened around her son's stroller handle. "Can we fight it?" "We can do better than fight it," Miller said. "We can make him destroy himself." The plan Miller outlined was high risk and surgical. Linda would disappear, not run, disappear, establishing safe harbor in a jurisdiction favorable to primary caregivers while Nathan's own evidence matured. Miller would file nothing, say nothing, let Nathan panic and make mistakes. Desperate men with resources always made mistakes. They filed emergency motions based on lies. They sent threatening communications. They revealed exactly how much they'd planned by overreacting to its collapse. "He's built a trap for you," Miller explained. "We're going to let him walk into it instead. Every document is drafted, every email he's sent, every dollar he's hidden. It's all evidence of malicious intent. But only if we're patient." "How long?" Linda asked. "However long it takes for him to prove our case for us. 6 months. A year. Maybe more." Miller leaned forward. "Mrs. Freeman, this isn't a sprint. This is letting him sprint into a wall while you build an empire behind his back." He slid a yellow legal pad across the desk with a single sentence written on it: "Don't fight his game. Use his arrogance against him. His own words will be his executioner." Linda read it 3 times, committing it to memory. "When do we start?" she asked. Miller smiled for the first time. "You already have." Linda became a ghost in her own home, moving through the penthouse like she was already gone. She started with the baby's clothes, packing away outfits her son had outgrown into donation bags that never made it to Goodwill. They went instead to a storage unit in Queens she'd rented under her maiden name, paid for with cash from grocery money she'd been skimming for weeks. Nathan never noticed. He'd stopped looking at her months ago. The removal had to be surgical. A few books from shelves holding hundreds. One suitcase from a walk-in closet overstuffed with luggage they never used. Her grandmother's quilt, folded into a vacuum bag and labeled winter storage. The removals were small enough to be invisible but deliberate enough to matter, like removing rivets from a bridge one at a time until the structure could no longer hold. She told Nathan she was nesting again when he noticed the donation boxes. "Spring cleaning helps with the anxiety," she said, making her voice small and apologetic. He'd nodded absently, already looking back at his phone, probably texting Jessica. His disinterest was a weapon Linda had learned to wield. The USB drive took 3 days to load completely. Linda worked in 20-minute intervals during her son's naps, Nathan's laptop open on the kitchen island, her hands shaking every time she heard the elevator in the hallway. She copied everything: the custody strategy, the financial fraud, the emails, the fabricated psychiatric records. Aisha had taught her how to encrypt the files with military-grade security and embed metadata proving authenticity. The drive was small enough to hide in a tampon box, the one place Nathan's privilege prevented him from ever looking. On a Wednesday afternoon, Linda was finishing the final transfer when she heard the penthouse door open. Nathan wasn't supposed to be home for 3 hours. Her heart seized. The laptop was still open, the progress bar at 87%. The folder titled Freeman Exit Strategy Evidence visible on the screen. She slammed the laptop closed and shoved the USB into her pocket just as Nathan rounded the corner. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone already accusatory. Linda let her face crumble, summoning tears that weren't entirely fake. "I was looking at photos of us. Before everything got so hard. I miss when you looked at me like I mattered." It was exactly the kind of emotional, pathetic confession Nathan expected from her. His expression shifted from suspicion to irritation to something almost like satisfaction. He was watching her break. It confirmed everything he believed about her fragility. "Linda, we've talked about this," he said, his voice dripping with manufactured patience. "You're being overly emotional. It's the hormones. You need to get yourself together." She nodded, wiping her eyes, playing the role perfectly. He left 10 minutes later for a dinner meeting. Linda pulled the USB from her pocket, her hands finally steady. The progress bar had reached 100% before she'd closed the laptop. She had everything. Linda had watched the security footage for 6 weeks, the same cameras Nathan installed to document her instability. The building's patterns were predictable as clockwork. Every morning at 4:38 a.m., the night doorman, Miguel, stepped outside for exactly 7 minutes to smoke a cigarette he thought the management didn't know about. At 4:55 a.m., the overnight valet, whose shift ended at 5, pulled the company sedan around to the garage level for the morning valet. Between those 2 moments was a 17-minute window when the lobby security existed only as unmanned cameras recording footage Nathan would never think to check. 17 minutes to disappear. The night before, Linda played her final performance. She made Nathan's favorite dinner, short rib bourguignon that took 4 hours she didn't have. She laughed at his stories about a merger he was structuring. She touched his hand across the table and said, "I've been thinking maybe I should see that therapist you mentioned." "You're right. I need help." Nathan's smile was genuine for the first time in months. He was watching her surrender, watching his plan work exactly as he designed it. He kissed her forehead before bed. "I'm proud of you for recognizing you need support." She'd nodded, playing broken and grateful, while her packed bags sat in the service hallway behind a false panel she'd discovered during her architectural survey of the building. Nathan left at 7:15 a.m. for a breakfast meeting with Jessica at Balthazar. Linda watched from the window as his town car pulled away, then moved with the efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed every step. She dressed her son in the outfit she'd laid out, transferred him to the carrier, grabbed the bags from the service hallway. The building superintendent's spare uniform, borrowed by Aisha through means Linda didn't ask about, fit well enough. Baseball cap pulled low, face down, looking like every other service worker the wealthy ignored. At 4:39 a.m., Linda stepped into the service elevator. The lobby was empty except for cameras. She moved quickly, pushing a cleaning cart Aisha had staged near the service entrance the night before, her son sleeping against her chest beneath the oversized uniform jacket. 17 minutes. The grey Honda Pilot was idling on the corner of West Street, hazards blinking. Aisha sat in the driver's seat, Atty Miller in the passenger side. Linda loaded the bags, secured her son's car seat, and climbed in. The door closed. They pulled into morning traffic. Anonymous. Invisible. Gone. At 4:47 a.m., Nathan Freeman pushed through the steel-reinforced door of the penthouse, reeking of vanilla orchid perfume and lies, expecting to find his compliant wife waiting with coffee and that broken, grateful smile she'd perfected. Instead, he found silence. The crib. Gone. The nursery. Stripped. On the kitchen island, his key fob, a matte black USB drive, and a note written on his own company letterhead. He read it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. And finally, too late, far too late, Nathan Freeman understood. He hadn't been married to a victim. He'd been living with an architect who'd spent months designing his complete demolition. Portland, Oregon became the foundation Linda had always deserved to build on. She and her son lived in a sun-filled craftsman in the Alberta Arts District, with wide porches and a backyard garden where her 3-year-old learned the names of flowers Linda's grandmother had once grown in Georgia. The rain didn't depress her the way Nathan always said it would. It felt cleansing, like the city was washing away everything she'd left behind. Raymond and Associates Architecture started in a co-working space with Linda, one drafting table, and a laptop containing designs she'd sketched during her son's naps. Her first project was a community center in East Portland, exactly the kind of hobby work Nathan had dismissed. It won a regional design award 6 months later. Then came affordable housing developments, a mixed-use transit project, a women's shelter designed with input from survivors. Within 2 years, her firm employed 9 people and had a 6-month waiting list. The work Nathan had made her feel small for pursuing became the empire he could never diminish. Her son thrived in ways that broke her heart and healed it simultaneously. He didn't remember Nathan. He didn't remember the penthouse or the cameras or the cold marble that had surrounded his first months of life. He knew finger painting and story time and a mother who was present, not performing. Then Attorney Miller called on a Tuesday morning. "The petition is filed," he said. "All of it. Every document, every email, every dollar he hid. It's in front of Judge Patricia Hendricks now." Linda had been expecting this call for 3 years, but her hands still shook. Nathan's response came within 6 hours, a flurry of emergency motions drafted in obvious panic. Emergency custody claiming parental alienation. Motions to suppress evidence he claimed was obtained illegally. Desperate accusations citing the fabricated psychiatric evaluation that was now Exhibit 23 in the case against him. Judge Hendricks denied every single motion with language that made Miller laugh out loud when he read it to Linda. Mr. Freeman's well-documented intention to defraud this court and weaponize custody proceedings demonstrates a pattern of conduct that renders his emergency claims facial absurd. 2 weeks later, a different envelope arrived. The American Institute of Architects was awarding Linda the Urban Innovator Award for her Portland revitalization work. The ceremony was in New York, at the Plaza Hotel, the same ballroom where Nathan had once hosted investor galas. Linda held the invitation, feeling the weight of 3 years of survival crystallizing into something else entirely. Vindication. She called Aisha. "I need you to find me the most devastating dress in existence." "You're really going back?" Aisha asked. Linda looked at her son building a tower from blocks, completely safe, completely loved. "I didn't run," she said quietly. "I withdrew strategically. Now I'm returning to collect what he owes." The Plaza Ballroom glittered exactly the way Linda remembered: crystal chandeliers, Manhattan's architecture elite in black tie, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. But Linda Raymond wasn't the same woman who'd once felt small in rooms like this. She wore a midnight blue gown that Aisha had called a declaration of war disguised as evening wear, her natural hair styled in elegant locks, her son back in Portland with Aisha's sister because some victories were meant to be witnessed alone. When her name was called, Linda walked to the podium with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd already won. Her acceptance speech talked about architecture as resistance, about designing spaces that protected rather than imprisoned, about building foundations strong enough to weather any storm. She never mentioned Nathan's name. She didn't have to. Half the room knew the story: the venture capitalist whose wife had vanished with their child, the custody case that had become legal legend among family attorneys. Nathan was standing near the bar when she descended the stage, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 years. His suit was still expensive, but it hung differently, like the man inside had diminished. He approached with the entitled stride of someone who still believed his money granted him access to anything. "Linda, we need to talk. Privately." She looked at him the way she might examine a building slated for demolition, clinical, detached, already seeing the empty lot. "No, Nathan. We don't." She opened her clutch and handed him a business card. "My attorney's information. All communication goes through him. And through the court transcripts you'll be reading for the next several years. You can't actually believe. The hearing is Thursday, 9 a.m. I suggest you attend." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing alone in a room full of witnesses. Thursday morning, Judge Hendrick's courtroom was standing room only. Attorney Miller presented the case like a prosecutor dismantling a conspiracy. Nathan's custody strategy documents, the fraudulent psychiatric evaluation, 18 months of financial fraud meticulously catalogued, emails with Jessica discussing Linda's deterioration like it was a project milestone. Nathan's attorney objected repeatedly. Each objection was overruled. The judge's ruling was devastating and absolute. Full physical and legal custody to Linda Raymond. Dissolution of marriage with findings of fraud and coercive control. Financial restitution totaling $6.2 million, every hidden asset returned, plus compensatory damages for emotional distress and career abandonment. "Mr. Freeman," Judge Hendrick said, her voice cold enough to frost glass, "you attempted to weaponize this court against the mother of your child. You fabricated evidence, committed financial fraud, and systematically abused your position of power. This court finds your conduct reprehensible and your claims entirely without merit." Linda stood, gathering her papers with calm precision. Nathan stared at her across the courtroom, his face ashen, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost. She met his eyes one final time. "You showed me your true foundation, Nathan. I simply chose to build my life elsewhere." Then Linda Raymond walked out of the courtroom, leaving Nathan Freeman to face the ruins of the empire he'd constructed on lies, while she returned to the life she'd built on truth. Thanks for sticking with me until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit like so you're the first to hear our next story. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I can't wait to hear from you.